question. Is there anything the Chinese Americans can do to break out of the perpetual foreigner identity that white Americana continue to look at as a point? Any simple answer?
There's no simple answer. You can assimilate, but when you assimilate, you look like you're trying too hard, right? And so it's not clear that that's a successful strategy. Chinese immigrants, Chinese Americans who could be sixth generation Californians or adoptees are now doing well in sports and the arts as comedians even. So the image is starting to change, but because of tension between the United States and China, there's always a suspicion, right? That in your heart, secretly, you're going to go back to China, even if you've never been to China in your life.
I think the COVID also has made it, Chen. I think the COVID's also made it a problem because here I am in Canada, and I think that ethnic Chinese mainland students, I live right near the University of Toronto. I get the sense that they're feeling somewhat uncomfortable because everybody looks at them and says, you're the one who brought this here. So that whole the president's effort to make this completely a China issue, because he doesn't want to take responsibility for his mismanagement, I think has added to this problem. And so we've seen, and that will keep it alive for a while, that when it may have been going away, but that will keep it alive as well.
Well, actually, a good number of questions coming in on this issue of the plight of Asian Americans. So I have a question here that says, or a comment first with the trade war, then COVID, and now all-out Cold War with China. Is it harder and more precarious than ever in our lifetime to be a Chinese American? I think goes to Frank.
Well, there are people on both sides of the Pacific who think the very term Chinese American or Asian American is an oxymoron, meaning it's impossible. You have to pick. And so we're losing this sense. Canada always did great, I thought, in the sense that you can have cultural heritage, right? You can enjoy the food, speak the language, yet nonetheless become a member of the body politic, be an equal, even run for office. And it's not just figuratively black and white. It's not as if you have to be on this side or that side. It is possible to be Chinese American and walk down the street and lead a normal life, right? You can embrace, this is my ancestry on the one hand, and this is my political loyalty on the other hand. But as tensions go up, people are just forced to pick. You can't do that, right? And that's the sense.
Here's a question.
I was just going to say in Canada, the concept for migration is very different. I mean, and ethnicity. We have our main concept is called vertical mosaic, where everybody lives in their own area, but they are allowed to keep their identity. Over second, third generations, they disappear anyway. But people are very much allowed to keep their ethnic identity and have their ethnic restaurants. And there's very little pressure. There's still racism, there's no doubt, but there's very little pressure to assimilate. And it's the hodgepodge, the melting pot mentality in the United States that is juxtaposed to the vertical mosaic. And that's a good sort of comparative.
Yes, here actually is a question for you. Are Chinese researchers in Canada under the same scrutiny? Can you address that?
No, they're not. But they're not at the same level, though the hostility against China is just as big in Canada right now, partly because of the two Michaels, right? The two Michaels that have been effectively kidnapped, Michael Spovey and Michael Kovrig, the second Michael's a very good friend of Asian Society and Alice and me, and we know him really well. So China is not very popular in Canada right now either. But I don't get the sense at this point that because we just don't have a national security issue. For the United States is a hegemon, right? It's running it's the number one power in the world. It feels threatened. I mean, we feel threatened as the Canadians feel threatened because China's bullying us, right? But we don't feel threatened because our national security is so much at risk, though the Canadian intelligence will say that we are at threat from China as well. The contexts and the countries are different.
Well, now, Hong Kong now has a national security law beginning July 1st. And President Trump has been taking very tough punitive measures against Hong Kong. So do you see Hong Kong, I mean, researchers, academics from Hong Kong background would come under the same scrutiny as Chinese or Asian American Chinese, or does it matter? You see them as all the same? Maybe Frank can address to this?
Well, that's the phrase, right? You all look alike, right? Historically in American culture. So with the coronavirus bias, for example, if you're of Korean descent, if you're of Vietnamese descent, so there was a family that was attacked in Texas, physically attacked by someone with a knife. They were of Burmese background, right? It doesn't matter if you're of Chinese background. People who hate don't bother to make fine distinctions. They don't pause and say, "Oh, are you actually from Hong Kong?" Well, if you're from Hong Kong, then you're fine, right?
No.
Chen, I'm not in Hong Kong yet, so I haven't had as much opportunity except through a little bit of internet to talk to some colleagues. But I very early on was worried about the science, the research labs, some of the research labs, and particularly some of the equipment. If any of the equipment can be argued that could be used for dual use technology, anything that can be used for any kind of military application, then Hong Kong can no longer import it because under the president's directive and under the Congress's law, it cannot be. So it'd be interesting to know. You're in Hong Kong, and I'll ask around when I get back soon, but to find out just how difficult it is now for researchers to get some of the technology that they wanted, because it's no longer going to be exported under the new regulations.
Well, never mind like high-tech technology, that is a very special area. How about even regular academic collaboration and research? Now that Hong Kong is perceived as another Chinese city, do you have a perception out there? Do you see that perception would impact on academic collaboration between Hong Kong and institution in Canada and the United States?
I see it going both ways. Well, I think Canada will be able to continue to do. I know I go around interviewing sort of mainland-born Chinese in the biotech field here around University of Toronto, and I think that they'll be okay. But from the Hong Kong perspective, I think we're going to catch it from both sides. We're going to catch it from the American side who say, "Oh, you're still going into China." I give presentations to, groups that could be seen to be, I do give talks to the Communist Party, the organization department of the Chinese Communist Party. I've talked to them. I have a good relationship with them on the talent stuff, because that's one of the things I do. Some Americans are going to say, why? I've had this. Why are you talking to those guys? On the other hand, the national security law in China is going to say, if I go and talk to the American consulate and sit down with the consul general, which is one of the ways that I collect information about what's going on in terms of U.S.-China relations, am I going to be now accused of, engaging with the enemy, with colluding with foreign forces, even though the law says that I have to be colluding with foreign forces for the purpose of subverting the Hong Kong government. But someone can decide, hey, you actually went there because you want to talk to the Americans and you want to share information with them, and therefore people are worried about that. So Hong Kong academics are going to get it from both sides.
Well, that would take another discussion. We're running out of time, but we have a few minutes. But let's try to conclude this with a little more positive note, right? And I'll go back to Frank. Do you see opportunities and possibilities of a track two discussion? What can institutions like UNESCO or Asia Society, the Committee of 100, these institutions, what can they do about it?
There's so much. You know, what has driven U.S.-China relations have been the personal relations. You know, if you go back and look at ping pong diplomacy, students of history know that started because an American ping pong player by accident missed the team bus during a Japanese contest and had to ride on the Chinese bus. And that serendipitous, just chance encounter created an opening so that Henry Kissinger could go on these secret missions. And so much of US China relations has been based on the negative, which is stereotyping images which have a germ of truth that's exaggerated and distorted, and the positive, which is people who are able, whether they're business people or humanitarian leaders, civic leaders, or organizations, Asia Society among them, that have said, look, there's a better way to do this. You know, let's sit down, let's break bread, let's have a banquet, and let's develop a relationship that will allow us to move forward for the benefit of humanity. That, when you look at the current U.S. Ambassador, Trey Branstad, the basis of his success has been Lao Pengyo, right? The old friends from 30 years ago when he was the Iowa governor, right? And hosted a delegation. And who would have known? But that encounter and the fact that people got to know one another, the risk is we're just destroying this all because we're not allowing these encounters anymore. We're saying that's suspect. If you meet someone of Chinese background, you must be a spy, right? That is not good for the United States. It's not good for humanity. There is a better course forward.
That's an encouraging note. What it means that let's get back to the basics. Let's get back to friendships, people to people relations, and not to get worried or scared about the stigma and suspicions. And like you play a very important role as the president of Queens College, which I'm quite familiar with because I live in New York for more than 20 years. And well, let's keep the conversation going and come to Hong Kong when flights resume.
I will.
And I'm sure Asia Society will be more than happy to help with the track 2, track 3, and people to people conversations. So thank you very much. I'll hand it back to Alice. Alice?
Thank you, Ying. And thank you, Professor Zweig. Thank you, Professor Frank Wu. This was a wonderful discussion. Apology for some technical glitch, but hopefully you can still view the entire content on YouTube and Facebook Live. I am personally delighted that two of you, Frank and David, can talk about an issue really close to my heart. As a Chinese American and have lived born in Taiwan, grew up in the States, now have lived in Hong Kong for cumulatively almost 20 years. It's really sad to see the divisions these days. And we just have simply too many divisions in this world. And I think it's institutions like Committee of 100, National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, Asia Society. It's really important for institutions to continue to do our work, regardless of what's happening on the political side, because that bridge is very important. And I remember my first trip as a young representative for state of Ohio to Wuhan. State of Ohio had a sister state relationship, Ohio and Hubei province. And that's how I ended up my first trip to China. And I think what's happening in Wuhan is really, the COVID situation has remind us how much that we need to collaborate. A disease like a pandemic like COVID knows no boundaries or borders. And I find it ironic that many of the scientists that Frank has mentioned, their work is in climate. In fact, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's not, killing each other. They're actually talking about a solution to solve, the climate change. And also scientists. I know here in Hong Kong, I have been such an admirer of scientists and researcher here in Hong Kong working on COVID. Scientists in China and US. I just can't help but think if they collaborate together that we would bring some of the solution to the world a lot sooner. And I cannot stress not enough. We're sick and tired of the lockdown all over. We're sick and tired of all the masks. And in Hong Kong with the recent spike, it's been really a depressing state. So I think the collaboration has to be the key. I don't know who, we are just going to continue doing what we do here at Asia Society. And we want to thank all three of you. Ying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And Frank also had a very interesting point when it comes to Vincent Chin, a very famous Chinese American who was killed for being mistaken for Japanese American during when the Japanese was investing in the United States and accused of taking jobs away from Americans. So sometimes they know, if you look at Chinese, you look at Japanese, I think they know no difference. So I think, again, it is something that we have to remember that we are in this together. And, enough of that, but thank you all for being with us this evening. And I look forward to bringing you more programs like this. Stay tuned. In light of what's going on in the US and especially on the education front with all the mixed signals, we hope to bring you more programs on education collaboration, and just kind of clearing up some of the misunderstanding, we hope, like we have done for the COVID-19 updates. COVID-19 episode 19 is next week, and we hope you will join us and as we try to clear the air and try to continue to be the bridge. Thank you. Good night. Good morning, Frank. And we look forward to seeing you all in person in Hong Kong or the United States anytime, or Canada, David, in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the chance.
Thank you.